Good morning and welcome to today's Boardroom. Thank you so much for being with us today. We're looking forward to having a great show and discussing a very important topic. If you are with us live, please do add any questions or comments that you have for our interviewees below. If you don't manage to catch this live, it will be streamed back on who'swho.mt, which is Malta's leading business portal. Now, today we're going to be discussing the effect of COVID on women in the workforce, something that has been termed the pink collar recession. There is talk of the fact that women could be affected in their careers by COVID for decades. And to help us understand whether that will be the case in Malta, we have a wonderful panel of women. They are Dr. Anna Borg. She is the director for the Center of Labour Studies at the University of Malta. She's also an activist who promotes and demands equality between women and men. We have Sarah Woods, who is the co-founder of She, which is a network for business women in Malta, and she is an avid supporter of women in business. And we have Dr. Roberta Lepre, who is a lawyer and activist and the founder of Weave Consulting, which is the CSR specialists. Ladies, it's great to have you on the show. Thank you so much for being with me.
Hi, thank you.
Now, we've had a few technical difficulties this morning, so we hope that everything is going to be going okay. But to start off our discussion this morning, Anna, I'd like to come to you first to explain to us the pink collar recession. It's a term that we've heard a little bit about, but perhaps our viewers haven't fully understand what the implications could be. We know that women are being hit harder economically than men. We have some data of that overseas, but could this possibly be true for Malta as well?
Okay, very good question. So when you look at the issue of women and the labor market, you will find that you have many more women, for example, working part-time. You will have many more women working reduced hours because of work-family issues. And so usually when there is a crisis, it is these people working part-time, working reduced hours who are first kind of, they are let go when there is a recession. So yes, if you look at statistics from the National Statistics Office in Malta, you will notice that although the numbers are not very big, and perhaps because we are still in the early stages of a recession, when you look at the rate of unemployed women, you will notice that the rate for women is actually higher than that of men. So this is happening abroad. This is happening in Malta. We are not the exception.
Okay. Thank you, Anna. A great introduction there to help us to understand what these implications could be. Roberta, I'll come to you now. Obviously, you are working very close to many women on the ground, in the field. You have perhaps a real-world understanding of how this might be impacting women in business. What's been your experience so far?
I think it's been varied. When we talk about women, I think it's very important that we also acknowledge the fact that all women are different. So they might be going through different phases in their life, different phases in their career. So obviously the impact on them and on the situation is different as well. I think perhaps it's very clear to everyone that the worst impacted are mothers with young children. Also because of the issue of schools having closed when we had the first wave or the first spike, whatever it was in March. So a lot of obviously care responsibilities pertaining to children's education fell on the mothers, so many of whom were also working from home. So perhaps those mothers with younger children were more negatively impacted than the mothers with older children who perhaps could carry on a little bit more independently. Emanating from that is the fact that single parents then were even worse hit than mothers where the two parents are contributing to the care of the child. So that's also pretty clear. And more so those mothers who are in self-employment, because when you're in employment, perhaps there is a little bit of a structure and a little bit of help that can be forthcoming from the employer and from the place of work. Whereas those mothers who are self-employed, I think, especially those that were not eligible for any support, those were really hit very, very badly.
Thank you, Roberta. And Sarah, you deal specifically with women who are in business, so perhaps running their own organizations, etc., supporting other women in the workforce and championing this part of our community. What has been sort of the impact that you have felt, perhaps yourselves within your own organization and also within your network of women in business?
Speaking from my personal experience, because that's what I'm familiar with, we were hit quite hard. I mean, we built our brand on fostering the physical connection between women. We used to hold large-scale events where women would come together and network and actually listen and genuinely engage with one another. We wanted, in an ever-growing virtual world, we wanted to foster the face-to-face connection. And obviously that's gone out the window, and we've had to hold these events and not knowing when they can come back into play. So obviously we've had to pivot and think of creative ways in which to actively engage our community. So we've been working on shifting our community online, and in fact we're working very hard on an online membership program that will be launched in the coming year. And that's not to say, though, that this wasn't without hardship. Yes, we regrouped, refocused, and redeveloped, but we felt very disheartened and very defeated almost, in the beginning of the pandemic. So it took a while for us to kick ourselves into gear and to start again. And on that note, I'd like to appeal to a lot of women that may be starting their own businesses, or perhaps maybe shifting careers throughout the pandemic, not to give up and to keep going.
Okay, thank you, Sarah. Some great advice there. And Anna, I'll come back to you now to maybe understand a little bit about what support there has been for women so far to keep them working, to keep maybe women-owned businesses going. Has there been enough, in your opinion?
Well, when I looked up, there was only one thing specifically aimed for parents, and this was a payment of 800 euros for those working full-time and 500 euros for those working part-time monthly to one of the parents who took additional leave to stay with the children when the schools were closed. So that was the only thing I could specifically find which was related to working parents. Other than that, I'm not sure if there was anything else. Of course, one needs to ask, is that enough? Because then what happened in the summer when children were not at school? What do you do? So I think perhaps we can do more and target mothers, and especially mothers with young children, and as Roberta said, single mothers who would require more help, more support. I think rather than putting all women in one basket, we need to start looking at specific categories of women who are impacted more harshly with this pandemic.
Okay, thank you, Anna. Rob, I'm seeing you nod your head there, obviously understanding everything that Anna is saying. What would be your advice about the additional support perhaps that we need to see here for different categories of working women?
Mm-hmm. I think the most obvious would be to look at the resources which are already available, rather than perhaps asking for new measures, new initiatives. And the most obvious would be to really start engaging fathers much more in this whole dialogue sort of thing. I think there has been progress in the sense that nowadays there are many more fathers who are much more hands-on, so to speak, and they contribute more. But even before the pandemic hit, we know that when it comes to care responsibilities and doing work within the home, there's a huge imbalance, and that is statistically proven. If you look at the data that is gathered by the European Institute for Gender Equality on a yearly basis, you'll see that, in fact, there is a huge imbalance there, and the women, let's say not necessarily mothers, carry most of that responsibility. So we really need to start sharing that responsibility, also to avoid overwhelm and burnout, because if a parent, a mother, is overwhelmed, she has too much to do, she's not going to perform her work properly, and she's not going to look after her children properly. So it's really about working together, working towards common solutions, and really pooling in our efforts to really start addressing the situation. Other than that, I feel that from an employer's point of view, perhaps we can start talking a little bit about more flexibility. I think many employers have really stepped up to the occasion, and they have been very agile and very quick to respond to transition to online work, and I applaud them. Perhaps now we can start working towards a little bit more flexibility in terms of at what time work is performed. Maybe we can be a little bit more flexible there. And maybe we'll start thinking about measuring outputs of our employees rather than measuring how much time they're actually sitting down at the computer and just being physically there. I think it's all about being productive, producing good output, giving your fair share to your employer, but also being able to balance your family responsibilities and your home responsibilities within this new reality, because let's face it, we all need to adapt, we all need to evolve.
Thank you, Rob. And Sarah, I'll come to you now. According to reports issued by the European Commission and the UN, pre-COVID, women already dedicated around 3 times as much time as men to unpaid domestic and care work for the family. Again, through your network and even through your own experience, do you think that this has changed as a result of the pandemic? And what are the results of that?
Yeah, I would say, speaking from my personal experience as a working mother of 2, I've had to add quite a few additional roles, to my role of mother. I've had to be a teacher, I've had to be IT administrator, I've had to be entertainer. There's quite a lot more roles that had to fit in to my agenda. I mean, that's not to say that my husband did not pitch in, but given the fact that my work setup is more flexible than his, I was often left alone to take care of the kids and also to man my business. In general, I would dare to assume that we've spent more time at home. So obviously more time caring for people at home, feeding, cooking, etc. So it's added a significant amount to the workload of women who generally, especially in Malta, take on the role of taking care of the family, I would say.
Okay, thank you. Anna, has that been your experience as well? And perhaps what can we learn from what has been experienced so far, perhaps as we go into this new period now where schools are going to be potentially on again, off again, and there are going to be changes that we see happening at a very fast pace?
Yeah, exactly in line with what Sarah Wood said. We know that women, and especially mothers of young children, have experienced much more stressful situations, much more conflict. Imagine, being a mother with 2 young children, having to homeschool while at the same time, perhaps, having to do your own work, the distractions, the children fight. So all that adds to the stress, where are you going to focus on? So there is clear research already showing that women have been stressed, and this is not helpful in any way. What was your question, Jo? Can you repeat if you had a second question to that?
Sure. Just to really understand what your experience has been, and perhaps the effect that this might be having on the workforce.
Yeah. Of course, in the long run, if people are stressed, this is going to impact on their health. We know the pandemic had a lot of impact in terms of mental health. So this could be a long-term mental health issue, which we need to also talk about. So it's not only about the money and the disruptions, but also about the long-term mental health impact this is going to have. And we need to address it, and we need to do something about it, because just talking about it is not enough. Like if we're going to leave mothers and continue putting all these burdens on them only and expecting them to be Wonder Woman coping with everything, at the end, something might give way, and usually it's their health, it's their mental health, and that can have an impact on children, on family, on society as a whole. So I think we need to talk as much about the mental health issue as we do, with the rest of this whole COVID pandemic problems that this is causing.
Certainly. And Roberta, what would you carry on from that? I mean, with regards to the mental health issues, what could we be doing to support women that are feeling overwhelmed, whether they are part of the workforce or running their own business?
Again, going back perhaps at the support that was given, I think we can all agree the support was relatively generous, but I find that it was a little bit sporadic in terms of who was given support and who was not given support. And I think that financial stress also compounds all the other types of challenges that come with perhaps being out of work or being having your hours reduced, worrying about your bills, needing to look after your children, being contained in a small space. So I think going forward, perhaps we could revise a little bit how the support is distributed. Maybe it can be distributed a little bit more fairly, I think. I know a number of persons, including a number of women, who primarily are self-employed, but who are not eligible for any kind of support, despite the fact that their working hours were drastically reduced, either because of external situations or because of internal situations. So that another thing which I find extremely helpful is having strong networks of support, whether that is your usual circle of colleagues or peers or friends. So I think having people in general, not necessarily women, being able to support each other, I think that helps as well. And also working on developing a positive mindset. I know it's very difficult, but it's something that also comes with practice. So really making a conscious effort to remain positive every day, to identify those issues that are actually positive rather than negative, and building on those. As well as then external circumstances. So I think implementing some temporary measures to reduce the current increase in cases will perhaps help towards alleviating some of our concerns as individuals, as mothers, as workers, and maybe it would help us feel a little bit less anxious about the weeks ahead.
Certainly. Well, we certainly hope for that. And Sarah, I'll come to you now to explain a little bit. Obviously, you help to inspire and guide women through the She Network to run their own businesses. We might see that has been impacted. Unfortunately, women may be choosing to join the workforce instead of start their own business or continue their own business in the weeks and months ahead. But if they do stick with their business and they are employers themselves, and also to wider employers, including men, of course, what should we be doing to support our female workforce at the moment?
That's a really good question. What I really want to just add to what Roberta was saying as well is that in this whole scenario, like with the pandemic that we're facing, the power of community is essential. I really think I've seen it through, we've been running online workshops and online talks ever since the pandemic has struck. And the power in people banding together, to support one another. And during these sessions, like the women wanting to open up and talk about their issues and actually feel connected to one another, there's something to say about that, and in a time of struggle and of difficulty, community is key. And I mean, what should we be doing to support these women? I totally agree with the mental health aspect. I believe self-care is key at this stage. We can't run the world, obviously, with broken people, It's important for mothers or any women or parents in general to realize that if they're having a hard time, you know, to sit with it and to try and figure it out, you know, instead of brushing it off and soldiering on, as we often do. To me, that's of the essence.
Thank you, Sarah. And Anna, I'll continue that conversation again now as we face this uncertainty over the next few months. What can employers do to support the women in their workforce? What tangible steps can they take to reduce the burden, but perhaps also obviously bear in mind that they are employers and they you know, keeping the business going is of course a critical part of being able to support their workforce. So how should they strike the balance?
I think the first important thing is that they acknowledge that there are going to be disruptions. I think once schools open, you are going to have a lot of, not only mothers, I would think parents who are going to have to go in self-isolation. So this is not something that is going to affect mothers only, but everyone. Because once you send a child to school, if one of the other children in the class tests positive, then I think the whole class has to go back, you know, to self-isolation. Probably both their parents then as well have to self-isolate. So I think that is the first thing that they need to do. Acknowledge that there are going to be disruptions and prepare. So what can they do? First of all, they need to cross-train their workers so that if you have, and you are going to have people who are going to be away from work, you will have others perhaps filling their shoes. You also need to be very, very flexible. As Roberta said, you know, it's not about where you do your work. If you can telework, I think we need to keep pushing for more telework. During the pandemic, we saw an increase from about 12% people working from home to about 33% of people working from home. I have heard anecdotal stories where some offices, just as soon as government opened, they demanded their workers to return immediately, and that caused a lot of concern because mothers still had their problems, you know, with children not being at school. I know others who have adapted and who have realized, you know, that telework can really work. So I think employers need to test and kind of change the mentality. They need to trust their workers a little bit more and find ways how to measure output rather than, you know, visibly seeing your workers at their place of work, because that is an old way. It's an outdated way of working. So really, we need to work on employers who perhaps are still resisting and are still demanding that their workers go. There needs to be flexibility also in shifts. You know, I think some people may be sending their children to school or on alternate days or something like that. So again, the employers need to adjust and work in these times, which are uncertain for everyone, to give as much as support as possible. I believe if we are in this together. So it's about keeping productivity going, but also about ensuring that people are able to earn a living in the circumstances that we are living. You know, they are difficult times, so we need a lot of adjustments, and that is, I think, key. So flexibility and constant stock taking and adjustments to allow, you know, to this dual agenda of keeping the business going, but also ensuring that your workers are thriving and are not crushed by the pressure that they are facing, essentially.
Thank you, Anna. And Roberta, I'll come to you now just to build on that. If we have women watching us today who think, you know, I need some support. I am working at the moment, but it's really, you know, I'm at the end of my tether. I'm not coping. What can they do perhaps to start to build the community that will help to give them that sense of support? Who should they be reaching out to, and what sort of conversations should they be having with their existing network?
Well, that's a complex question because once again, it depends on the person and their situation. I think perhaps for women who are in employment, they can perhaps reach out to their HR, be very frank about what they're feeling, ask for help if they feel they need it. And I have really seen employers being very willing to provide the help and support that is needed. Having said that, I'd like to do a little caveat, because employers are also under huge pressure at the moment. They've been impacted really badly. They are also human beings. They might be panicking. So it's all about dialogue and being frank and being fair at the same time. So we ask for help, but we also need to be flexible in terms of, giving our bit as well. For self-employed women, it's a little bit more tricky. Many of them tend to be very isolated, because many self-employed people work literally on their own. So they're at their desk on their own for very long periods of time. So in that case, they can perhaps reach out to co-workers, friends, their networks really, whether it's their professional network or their personal network. From my end, I am currently also working with an organization called Core Platform, where we are developing a program which was not the result of COVID. It was a result of the fact that we know that we need to increase the number of women in decision-making positions in Malta. So we are developing and we have launched a program to which we are mentoring women, but not only. Besides the mentoring, the participating women will also become part of a network which is intended to provide actually this kind of support to the women who are part of our program. So perhaps if there is anyone who thinks who could benefit from this initiative, of course, they are very welcome to reach out.
Thank you, Roberta. And I'm aware that program will be crowdfunding soon. So we encourage our viewers to look out for that and to support it if they can. So thank you for that introduction to that. Sarah, I'll come to you now. Obviously, you are dealing with many women in business that have been affected by COVID, but some of them have pivoted. You use this word pivoted. They have found ways to keep going. Could you perhaps share your own experience of what that felt like, both the pressures and the positives, and maybe some examples of within your network that have sort of inspired you to hopefully keep other women to keep their business dreams alive?
For sure. As I said, for us, we've had to put our heads together and see what would work best in this scenario. She is co-founded, so it's myself and Julia Perry who's behind She. And apart from being the co-founders, we wear many hats in our business, so we take care of all aspects of the business. So that on top of the struggles of dealing with homeschooling, etc., has been quite hard. But we've pulled through, with the support of each other and with friends of the community as well. And we've decided to create online membership, which, as I said, will be launched in the beginning of next year, and promo for it will be coming out towards the end of this year as well. And through this, we want to create a safe space for women to continue to network as we were providing before, but also to learn new skills and also to get the encouragement to push their careers forward. Within the community, we've seen quite a few people pivot as well. We've had, I don't know, business owners that have had restaurants, businesses that have provided delivery. There's been a lot of that. Working creatively in order to get your product out there. We encourage people to continue doing what they believe in, because there is always a way. There is always a way to think creatively and outside the box to get your product to your audience, even if it means having to reshuffle some things or turn things around. There's always a way to get to succeed. And who knows, it could be something that you hadn't thought about before that could work even better. So as Roberta said, keep thinking positive.
Thank you, Sarah. And before we start to wrap up today, Anna, I'd love to just get your thoughts on the impact on the gender gap that COVID might have had. Despite 30 years of progress, the gender gap was still with us before the pandemic. And in many ways, I imagine it is worse now and potentially going to be impacted further. So what are your thoughts on that, and what needs to be done to keep addressing it despite the pandemic?
Yes, we need to keep talking about it. I think many people would assume that we're in, 2020, that, with university churning like 60% of the graduates now, everything is fine. But you only have to stop and look at the reality, look at the numbers, and realize that most of the businesses, most of the management posts are still taken up by men. You realize that we have a gender pay gap, which is increasing. We have quite a large pension gap, which means that women, as they grow older, are becoming poorer. So, if we take stock, and we need to take stock constantly, we realize that there is still a lot to be done. And for example, I am always kind of pointing out that in Malta till now, we don't even have a proper gender equality plan for women and men, which is well researched, well financed, with a plan of, what we should tackle, when we're going to tackle it, who is going to do it, what money has been allocated to do it. So whilst there has been positive, sporadic kind of measures which have helped women in various instances to move ahead, overall there is still a lot to be done. And I think the most important aspect that we should work on is challenging traditional gender stereotypes, like this idea that caring of children, caring of the elderly still falls on the shoulders of women, whilst men are still kind of considered to be the main breadwinners, main earners, even though, now we have a dual earner family. But that very rigid way of looking at care and paid work, we have to challenge it. So I think we need to start very early in life, and in our educational system, we need to instill and challenge those values. And till now, we haven't been doing that enough. So it's going to be a very long time before we're going to see change. For example, if you look at the amount of Maltese men who took parental leave, we have 4 months parental leave for parents, which is usually taken by the mother. And I believe the last statistics I looked at, it is less than 1% of men who took any parental leave. And government, for example, only gives 1 day of leave to fathers, So what messages are we giving to fathers? Is that, they are not essential in the family. After a day at home, perhaps to take the wife to hospital, the next day you go back to work. So, there are so many things that we need to work on, but we haven't. And this is a long-term process and project which we have to tackle. We've been talking about this for a very long time, but I'm afraid we haven't tackled properly yet.
Okay. Thank you, Anna. So, ladies, this has been fascinating. And just to bring our conversation to a close now, I'd love to add some value to those who are watching us, and perhaps for each of you to share a key tip, perhaps to women in the workforce, women who are running a business, women who are not able to work at the moment, or even men who want to offer more support. So take your pick of who you'd like to offer your advice to, but please share your key tip. And I'll start with you, Roberta.
Okay. Yes, I think today we focused a lot on the challenges that we are facing, but I also, and I do say this very genuinely, I think COVID has also provided a lot of opportunities for those who can actually see them and harness those opportunities. So for a long time, for example, we have been pushing for more teleworking, and now it's there. It's become very normal for people to telework. So I feel that's a positive thing. Even if you're in a business or you're thinking of setting up a business, you literally have now the whole world at your fingertips. This was a process that had already started, but again, COVID really managed to speed up that process towards digitalization. So it's much easier now to reach out to markets, even markets outside of Malta. So that's a huge opportunity there as well. And also if perhaps you had been wanting to take a course or, invest a little bit in yourself, once again, a lot of opportunities. You literally need to switch on your laptop and they're there. So there are a lot of opportunities. Really, let's, take a good look around us, spot those opportunities and harness those opportunities. So that's my final message.
Thank you, Roberta. Great stuff there. And Sarah, over to you.
To me, I want to send out a message to women that if you're feeling anxious, if you're feeling a bit overwhelmed, communicate, communicate with your partners, communicate with your bosses, communicate with your friends. I think this is super important, and having these discussions and having, a plan B or thinking about solutions and verbalizing it has immense positive effect and will help to alleviate some of your, take school, for example. I know there's a huge issue with kids going back to school. Mothers are worried, will they go, will they not? I'm sure that throughout the scholastic year, which I believe will be a bumpy one, kids are going to have to quarantine at some stage. Schools may close for a while. So do have these conversations with your partner. If this happens, what will we do? Who's going to take care of the kids? Who is going to go out to work? Just communicate. I think that's my main message. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. And finally, Anna, over to you.
Okay, I think the message I want to leave you with is that we need to think about mothers who are perhaps having it worse than us. I think those who can work from home, like many of us can do, we are privileged. We are privileged. Perhaps if our children are older, we don't have so many disruptions. We can work and still stay at home. But there are women who are really suffering. I think poverty increases that, like if you live in a tiny flat with no proper office space, where you have two children being homeschooled and you have one computer, for example, and who's going, is it the mother who's going to work? Is it the children who are going to be homeschooling? We have to think about mothers who have a disabled child, or who have children with severe autism who need a lot of attention. So I think in all this, we need to realize that some of us are privileged and others need much more support. And we need to make sure that those, we do not forget about them. And we constantly, if they can't speak, because often they don't have a voice, we speak on their behalf to make our politicians aware and perhaps even employers ask them to be a little bit more generous perhaps with them, because they really need more help.
Okay. Well, thank you all. Really great advice for both the women in the workforce watching and women who have their own business, and also for wider employers to know how to support their workforce at this time. It's been great to get your advice. So thank you so much for being with us on the show. And thank you all for watching us, whether you are at home or in the office. We appreciate you being with us. If you do have any comments that you'd like to add, please add them below. We will pass them on to our interviewees. And we'd also love to hear from you about the shows that you might like to see in the future. So get in touch. We'd love to hear from you. And we look forward to seeing you next time on The Boardroom.